This is lesson 1.5 with Jen and Vi. This is just a quick little lesson on the musical notes and the duration of the notes, the note values as we call them. This will lead into music lesson number 2. So we have several different kinds of notes, different note values in music. What you have to remember is that basically you're dividing the notes in half if you start with a whole note. So if you work your way down, you just divide each note in half by the previous note. So a whole note in half is a half note. Half of a whole note is a quarter note. Another half is an eighth note. Divide 8 by a half and it's 16th note. Divide that by 2 and that is a 32nd note. So let's take a look at these notes. The whole note is just a circle by itself. The half note is an open circle, but with a stem on the side, a little line there. A quarter note is a black note with a stem on the side. And then an eighth note is like a quarter note, black with a stem, but it has a little flag on the side. If you divide that eighth note by 2, you get a 16th note, so you just add an extra flag, 2 flags. And the 32nd note, half of a 16th note, has 3 flags, so you add yet another flag. So those are the note values that you can have. A whole note, divide that by 2, you get half. Divide again by 2, you get a quarter. Divide by 2 and you get an eighth. Divide that by 2 and you get a 16th. And divide that by 2 and you get a 32nd. Now, any one of these notes you can add up to equal any one of the other notes. For example, on the left we have a whole note. You can put 2 half notes to equal the same number of counts as a whole note. A half note, you could also use 2 quarter notes. That would equal a half note. 4 quarter notes would also equal a whole note. And then we have down at the very bottom a quarter note. You could have 2 eighth notes in a quarter note. How many eighth notes do you think would be in a half note? Let's draw the half note at the bottom, Vi. So if you've got a half note there and you want the same number of eighth notes, we've got 2 quarter notes in a half note and 2 eighth notes in each quarter note. So that would give us 4 eighth notes to equal a half note.
Doing a really bad job at drawing.
That's okay. So as you can see, you can add up any different number of certain notes to equal any other note. All you have to do is divide by half or multiply by 2. So divide by 2 or multiply by 2. Simple math for musical note values. Now if you'll notice, we do have one note there that has a little dot next to it. Let's talk about that dot. The dot represents half of whatever the note is that it is next to. So if we have a half note, the little dot next to it is half of that half note, which would be a quarter note. So a dotted half note is equal to 3 quarter notes. What if we had a dotted quarter note? Just put a dot next to the quarter note down there. So that little dot is half of the quarter note. So half of a quarter note is an eighth note. So a dotted quarter note would be 1 quarter note is 2 eighth notes plus another eighth note makes 3 eighth notes. So that is the dotted note. The dot is half of the value of the note that it is next to.